Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever people are joining us from today. It's great to have you. This is TIAC's third installment of a webinar and Jim's second with TIAC. So his feedback was positive and he agreed to put up with our shenanigans one more time. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah, hopefully you're having a great day. And so technical issues we were having, we'd like to blame it on traffic, but everybody's kind of working from home, so we can't use that excuse this time. We've got quite a few participants on the line joined us, so thanks for their time. And quick overview of Jim, second time introducing him, so I'll be quite brief. He comes with extensive background in business, finance, and banking. Don't hold that against him, but he's also stated had he not enjoyed the previous webinar so much, he would be on the pro tour golfing right now. So luckily his passion for us has lended us his presentation for an hour. So welcome back, Jim. And again, like the game we played last time, the chat blog is open for any kind of questions. I'll moderate the questions and chats coming in. And just to kick things off, I'd appreciate if everybody just typed in where they're joining us from so we get a idea of our footprint. So welcome, Jim. Welcome everybody to the webinar, and let's interact.
Sean, thank you so much for that warm introduction, and you have done the in-depth research, obviously, with those introductory comments. Thank you so much. My golf game is terrible, but don't tell anyone, okay? Let's keep that to ourselves. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your colleagues at the Thermal Insulation Association of Canada. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the last round, absolutely. Hey, just if you haven't noticed, this thing called COVID-19, there's a little bit of that stuff out there, and it's probably having an effect on you and your colleagues. I think this is what I think of it. There's so much that's in the news right now, but if nothing else, I think COVID has really underscored for all businesses, all organizations, the importance of having a variety of options available to them. And to use the word that's sometimes used in the entrepreneurial innovation space, the need for a pivot. When things go sideways on us, and they sometimes do, we are experiencing a lot of need for pivoting here in our organization. So the nice thing is, in my opinion, is we have tools like the business model canvas that can help us to take a look at new and emerging opportunities and then explore them a little more completely in a way that's different than the traditional business plan. So what we're going to do today is take a look at a number of things. We're going to look at what business models are in general, but then specifically the business model canvas. We're going to spend a little bit of time exploring the 9 different building blocks within the canvas, the business model canvas, and we're going to consider some reasons why using the business model canvas could be beneficial to you and the organizations that you're with. I would trust that over the course of this session, you'll think about your specific situation, how these concepts can be applied to you as you are now, and perhaps with the ideas that perhaps are running around right now within your circles as to what you might be doing in the near future. So the canvas can be a tool to help you explore that a little more fully yourself as well as with your team. So we're going to try to take your questions at the close of the session here too, but we do have a couple of points in the presentation where we'll come to you for a little bit of feedback. And Sean, thank you in advance for stick handling that. Now, I can't see the GoToWebinar screen, so I'm relying on you, Sean, and your team. I wonder if maybe by a show of hands or by some expression that you might be able to do, how many of you do have an idea that you're wanting to explore with this tool, the business model canvas? Can you quickly indicate if either thumbs up, thumbs down, or a hand up if that's the case? Sean, can you maybe just comment if you're getting some feedback on that?
Absolutely, Jim. We got a couple hands up here, Jim.
Okay, so a couple do have some ideas. If by chance you do not have a new thing that you're trying to explore with your go forward strategy, maybe try to apply your current situation and apply that onto the canvas, and maybe think about how these different aspects, the 9 different segments of the canvas, relate to your current situation. That might be helpful as a bit of a review as well. Now, I have really enjoyed my opportunities to work in private sector, public sector, as well as the not-for-profit sector. And as Sean alluded to, a good portion of that was with the financial world. Reviewing business plans, traditional business plans, was a regular routine, and often that was for things like business startup or the renewal of credit facilities, expansion of operations as entrepreneurs were moving forward in better times, I might add. My first introduction to the business model canvas was probably about 10 years ago. And since then, I've had opportunity to use it and see it used with students at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology here in Edmonton, Metro Edmonton area, as part of their innovation, entrepreneurship and innovation program. What I've seen is this: the business model canvas allows us to test our ideas against reality, and it gives us an opportunity to make a change, to pivot into a new and better direction. So let's take a little bit of time and explore how this might be applicable in this session. I just jumped over who I am because I've already talked to you about that. You know, when we take a look at what's going on around us, we may see a lot of this, right? Chaos. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of noise out there. People are trying to reposition themselves and get the economy re-energized back into I guess we're longing for the old normal, but I think it's a very long stretch for us to try to come back to what the old normal was. Life and business is filled with challenges. There's no doubt about that. And at times those seem insurmountable. There was a Chinese proverb that I came across some time ago. If we don't change our direction, we're likely to end up where we're headed. So for us, in this world that's filled with chaos, we are really looking for a sense of order. We're trying to get our ducks in a row. And in your own organizations, that's what you and your team are probably doing right now, is how do we adjust to what we're dealing with at this point in time? You know, there's something really comforting. There really is something comforting in having order. It's predictable. We know what to expect. We have a framework, we have a construct, we have a reality that we're used to, and we don't like change. Change is uncomfortable. But change is definitely something that we've been required to do. So in this world of chaos and looking for a sense of order, what can we do? I think one of the things that we can do is realize that where we are right now and the destination that is further ahead of us, there's a gap between now and then, between here and there. And the saying, if we don't know where we're going, any road might take us there. Yeah, there's a variety of ways we can go, as this particular illustration shows us here. Experimenting with something like the business model canvas gives us a chance to test those ideas, and that's what we want to do here today. There is a quote, I don't know if I used it in the last session that we conducted with the association members here, but I really do like it. Rosabeth Moss-Cantor of the Harvard Business School said this: change is disturbing when it happens to us, but exhilarating when done by us. Can you get that? Can you understand that? Do you appreciate that? When we are the agents of the change, we have a sense internally that there's a better future that's ahead. We need to convey with our team and with our colleague that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and the canvas will give us an opportunity to explore what that future might be prior to us actually jumping into it. One of the challenges, and maybe you've experienced this in your work environments either now or in the past, I've certainly experienced it in the different roles I've had, is a concept called silo thinking. Silo thinking is where we are immersed in our immediate group, our smaller group within the organization, and that's maybe all that we can really see. The danger with that is it leads to these things that you see on your screen right now: poor communication, a sense of empire building, competition within the organization for resources, perhaps even duplication and working at cross purposes, where one group is trying to move something forward and another is trying to shut it down. Oh, so many things can go sideways in this. So the canvas gives us an opportunity to communicate what we're thinking of and then exchange that with other parts of our organization to get the groups talking about what that better future might look like. So quickly, there is on YouTube, I found this many years ago, if you want to do a search later, not right now, but a 2-minute video that is very quick, very succinct on the business model canvas explained. Strategizer.com is a website that is the newer version, I suppose, of what the business model canvas was housed on. And that gives you a real quick look. We're going to take a little more in-depth look at the canvas over the course of the next minutes ahead. If you're wondering what a business model might be, if I could perhaps speak on behalf of our good friend, fellow Canadian, Dragon's Den star and Shark Tank star, Kevin O'Leary, a name that's probably familiar with a lot of you. When he's talking with those who have innovative ideas and are looking for capital, he likes to use the phrase with them, how do I make money, right? That's what he is focused on as a venture capitalist. Now, if we were to put ourselves into that same position and on behalf of the organizations we represent, how does our business make money? How does our organization have sufficient revenues to offset expenses and not run in a deficit situation? So a business model is basically looking at that question. How does an organization, how does a business make money? It describes how value is created, how products and services are delivered, and how you add value to your target customer. So this particular one, Business Model Canvas, developed by Alexander Osterwalder, he has put together this, and we're going to take an in-depth look at it starting now. Here's the big picture view of what the canvas looks like. If you can envision, these 9 different boxes cover some strategic areas that help tell a picture, and it's a collaborative effort. The canvas provides a big view, and we're trying to find out, on behalf of the organization, is the opportunity we are looking at, or is our current situation doing what we want it to do? Is it having an impact in terms of, is it generating the revenues that we need it to generate to cover the operating expenses, and also at the same time leave a net profit for the business, as well as compensate shareholders for taking the risk of investing in our business in the corporate model. So let's take a quick look at this, all the different sections, and again, drilling down a little bit further, not to the lowest level within the canvas itself, the 9 sections, but let's take a closer look at the canvas. And maybe you're wondering, why should I be interested in the business model canvas? Here's a couple of good reasons that I would ask you to consider. First off, as you saw on the previous slide, it's very visual, it's very succinct, and it's a compact picture. It provides a clear focus. So it's easy to see what is being considered for a potential decision. It's a neat breakdown of the major considerations that any organization really needs to think about to get a better picture of the direction that could be ahead. Quick iterations is possible. It's very flexible. I've seen students use this, and I've seen business people use it. And when they have a chance to experiment with the first idea and see that maybe it isn't quite doing what they want it to, they can quickly change some of the variables that they're working with and try that in the marketplace to get actual feedback from potential customers or users of whatever it is that's being offered. It is, in fact, a way to see what the relationships are between these different aspects that are important to a business or organization to be successful. And it is very succinct. I mean, there's not a lot of dilly-dallying when it comes to what is this trying to tell us. In fact, you might find that some of the explanations within the 9 different boxes as you're working with it, maybe they're too brief. there is more that goes behind the comments that would be put onto the canvas itself. But I have seen a completed business model canvas serve as a very useful starting point to develop a more complete business plan. And when I work with entrepreneurs, I often ask them to go through this process with me and on their own to begin fleshing out what would go into the more traditional business plan. And of course, it's very portable. As you saw, it's one page. That's something, if it's captured electronically, can be circulated, maybe in a photograph or even in a smaller format, because sometimes it's put up on a big whiteboard for a group to work around. But in a smaller format, it can be passed along in person to someone to take a look at it. So let's take a quick look at 4 different sections within this as we drill down into the 9 segments. This one here, the value proposition, really focuses on a very important question. Simon Sinek is renowned for asking the question, why? Begin with why. Think about, why is it that this product or service that you're working with, why is it that that's going to be beneficial to your target audience? How is it going to help them? How is it going to improve their life or make them more successful, more efficient? The next area that we might look at encompasses 3 different segments within the business model canvas, and it's really focused on this. Who are you trying to reach? Who is your customer? What are the relationships that you want to establish with them? And how is it that you're going to get your message of the value that you have communicated across to that target audience? The next area, flipping over to the left-hand side of the canvas, deals with 3 components again. This time, we're focused on how are you going to deliver your product or service or your value proposition? How is this going to be executed? What actions have to take place? So the big question is, what sort of infrastructure is needed? What processes, what partnerships or key relationships are going to be needed or perhaps are desirable for you in a go-forward strategy with this? And then with no pun really intended, but okay, I'll take it if it works, the bottom line. What are the results that are generated from this particular initiative? What results? What are the revenue streams that could come from this if it was acted upon? And of course, what are the costs that would be associated for moving this forward? So now let's maybe take a quick look at each of these. You can really start anywhere on this canvas. I mean, it's very, very fluid. It's very flexible. I like to start here with the value proposition, focused on what it is that you're proposing to offer to your target audience.
So Jim, how many times have you seen this business model drafted once and it was perfect and never changed?
Never. Did that come through? Never. No, with the students at NATE, I mean, they take a class on using the business model canvas as part of a lean startup program that they're involved in. And every week they have gone through a process of taking a look at the different sections, asking questions to test, and going out into the market basically and asking people if their assumptions are valid. And you know, 99.9% of the time they're coming back with a new insight that causes them to revise their business model canvas, and they do it again and again, many different iterations.
Yeah, and I think maybe just a point on this too, Jim, is it's called a business model canvas, but knowing a lot of our participants and the demographics of our membership, is this could also be changed down to, you know, when you're adding a discipline or a service to your company, or maybe even moreover when you're targeting a certain project, you could almost call this a project model canvas and use the same structure and framework just to capture that strategy.
Absolutely. And you know, since this has been introduced, you're absolutely right, Sean. There have been many different versions and slants that have been given to the business model canvas. And so whether it's for a project or whether it's a special initiative, internally or externally, it can be used in many, many different scenarios. That's why it's so flexible. That's why it is a great tool to experiment with. So in terms of the value proposition, maybe just to kind of close on that and this particular piece, Osterwalder would probably state that your value proposition should have some element that makes it unique, different from the competition. So keep that in mind. What is it that's maybe a little bit different, a little bit better than other options that would be available to your target audience at this point in time or in the near future as you see things changing? From the value proposition, I would typically take a focus on the customer segments, and move over to that right-hand side of the business model canvas. And when you take a look at that, there's a number of ways that you can slice and dice that, but in terms of your customer segment, you could take a look at, again, are you looking at a certain demographic, or are you looking at an industry sector? Where is it that your customer is on the landscape in front of you? And in terms of ways of reaching your target audience, I mean, first of all, you have to know who they are. And very briefly, the materials that support the business model canvas, and again, Strategizer does a terrific job in helping walk through the use of the business model canvas. You might be looking at things along these lines. You might be looking at mass markets where there is in fact a large pool of potential customers who would be interested in your product or service. And it's important to know that within that group that there is in fact a need or demand. So if we think of, you know, some of the things that have been in the news recently, our relationship with our friends in the United States, the US, it seems that we're back into a scenario again where there's tariffs on aluminum and steel. Again, those are products that are commodities that are available, and you know, whatever it is that you make, who is the customer that would be using your product, your service now, or the one that you have further in mind? You might be looking at something like a niche market, and a company that, again, I'm kind of using one of their products here right now, an Apple product with a Mac computer. But, you know, you might be tailoring your product or service for a niche market that isn't looking for a specific commodity, but is looking for something that is a little more refined and focused on the needs and the preferences of the consumer, of the user, of the business that uses your product or service. So Apple is one that comes to mind that has kind of created almost like a cult following, if you will, you know, for following the products with the latest and greatest that they come out with from time to time. Diversified segments might be another way that you would segment multi-platform markets, and just different ways to slice and dice who it is that you are trying to attract. Now, again, as you think about your target audience, the next thing that you want to focus on is knowing what sort of relationship do you want to establish with that customer base. What's the relationship that you want them to have with you? How do you want them to feel about your organization? So Sean, maybe I could just encourage all of our members here, and you might see some feedback here. Is there a word or two that you might use right now, you know, without giving away any, you know, trade secrets, but is there a word or two that would maybe describe the essence of the relationship that your business is feeling would be valuable to establish with your target audience? And Sean, feel free to jump in if there is some comments that come in that response. But again, if people do want to just type a word or two, feel free to do that. And Sean, just jump in if you've got something you'd like to share. When we think about the customer interface, and I'm just going to maybe move down to this next one with respect to the relationship, there's a lot of different ways that we can establish relationships with that target audience. And you probably experienced this in your own life, and your businesses, your organizations maybe offer some degree of this type of a connection with your target audience. Think of personal assistance. And again, as a consumer, you know, when we go into a store, what's the level of interaction that the staff of the organization, the business, the shop, the store, how do they interact with you, or do they not interact? In some cases, depending upon the product or the service, that relationship is enhanced by the type of interaction that the organization has with its customer. So personal assistance, where an employee interacts directly, provides a bit of a personal touch and looks after the customer before the sale, during the sale, and in some cases after the sale with after-sale service. That's one approach that could be taken. If you want to up it just a little bit and you think of some of the more exclusive higher end stores, that relationship is taken to an entirely different level. And maybe you can think of it, some of the automobile dealerships that Sean probably has catered to, where they bring you in, you have the coffee shop, you have the golf dome, and you're treated like royalty. And Sean deserves that, of course. But some of those organizations bend over backwards. It's probably embedded somewhere in the pricing, but it's the experience. It's the way that the customer is looked after, respected, and the relationship is encouraged to develop. Sean,
So
is there
Jim,
any feedback that's maybe come?
Yeah, we've got some feedback, but I just want to clarify that I basically go to a pick apart salvage yard and build whatever I can build from that. But we did have a relationship as a solutions provider come in. Good one, and I think that's pretty common throughout the industry.
Yeah. And I would think, given the group that we're dealing with here, there would be a lot of commonality in terms of the approach that the businesses within the association try to exhibit. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Solutions provider, people are looking for solutions, definitely, to the challenges. And the quicker you can deliver the solution, the most cost-effective way of doing that and still maintaining quality, the better. A couple of the other ones that are maybe, oh, sorry, Sean, something else?
I was going to say, just knowing, again, with our demographics of our membership, a lot of that is, we're pulling from largely the same labor pools depending on the region. So, the tagline, how our people are a difference, that doesn't really hold true in our industry because our workforce is so transient. So you have to kind of be a little more creative and change that relationship. It's almost a relationship with our processes or the industry processes or procedures, rather than the difference is our people or our strength is our people, because that's a pretty, motherly statement.
Yeah, with a lot of changeover inside of organizations, it is difficult to establish that long-term connection with customers. But if you just maybe, reflecting back on a commercial I saw the other day for a well-known service provider, McDonald's, just to mention the name, are we getting this interference on the slide here? Sean, are you with me there?
Yep, slides look good on our end.
Okay, super. I had a little message pop up here. Sorry about that. McDonald's, they hire a lot of younger people and retired people too, right across the demographics of employee base. But ultimately, they have a system in place that allows individuals, regardless of their background, experience, education, allows them the opportunity to provide an excellent customer experience because of the system that they have. So yeah, change occurs, but organizations do have an opportunity to let their people shine and represent well on behalf of the company. Other modes, maybe just to quickly go to that, self-serve. I think we've all seen that and experienced that, the frustrations that can occur wandering up and down the aisles. Automated services, technology allows for a lot of automation of the processes that engage with customers and help find the solutions that they are looking for. And then at the appropriate time, perhaps engage with the right people. Communities, those are another way that organizations are creating opportunity for the target audience to interact both with the organization as well as amongst themselves as a target audience. So that's kind of a neat way of sharing the experience, and hopefully it's a positive experience. So moving forward, loyal customers, maybe just that relationship is so important. Again, if you can build loyal customers that buy from you on an ongoing basis, and beyond that, refer others to you, that's solid gold. That's priceless. And to the greatest extent possible, your team will probably want to try to do that on behalf of the organization. Encourage your team to build those long-lasting relationships where possible. Oh, I have kind of frozen here. Okay, so I think we're going to channels now.
Yep, quadrant and channels.
We have gone to channels. Okay, we've switched channels. These are basically the means by which your organization extends the product or service that you have out to your target audience, your customer segment. I mentioned earlier, doing it quickly, providing a timely solution, and cost effectiveness. Those are some of the things that most customers are really going to appreciate. Just speaking to the channels and wrapping that up, customer-owned facilities like a storefront, a wholesale or retail outlet, that's one avenue that you might pursue in terms of reaching the audience. The other one is to develop relationships through partners, and we'll come to partners a little bit later in the canvas. But the thing that I'd maybe challenge you to think about now and into the future as you do changes with the business model canvas, find out what channels are most important to the customers that you are reaching. And maybe ask yourself or investigate, do some research, what channels are being used by your competitors now to reach their customers? Give that some consideration, and then weighing all of that, where could some improvements be made to help you more effectively reach the customers that you are pursuing? All right, moving on. Let's get to this part of the bottom line, and that's the revenue streams. Because what we've talked about in the last 3 segments of the business model canvas, those 3 areas should give us a sense as to what sort of volume of product or service we may be able to sell, provide to our customers, serve our customer base. In other words, so many units at a certain average price per unit, whether it's a product or service, should generate X number of dollars of revenue for a specific period of time, typically an annual number. So that's kind of the math that you could do. I know that's very high level and you know, very basic, but that's something that you may be able to get a sense of in having gone this far in doing your business model canvas and experimenting with those that you're hoping to reach. Now, what is the product or service that you're selling? Again, the revenue stream. That could be things such as an actual product or service, as we've mentioned, and that's basically you're selling these things to your customers. In the case of a product, it could be something like inventory, materials that you've made, parts that you've made, or it could be tools that you've created that help them in doing the work. These are assets that you sell for a certain amount of money, and your customers then have ownership of them. Another potential revenue stream that I've seen with different organizations is usage fees, where the company charges the customer for the use of the product or service, or having the ability to access it. Another one might be a subscription model. Think of software, perhaps, where you subscribe to a software as a service, you know, for a period of time, and you pay a subscription fee for that. In times gone by, the popularity has maybe waned somewhat with electronic delivery of information, but newspapers and magazines would often be by subscription. So again, these things are still out there, but that's a potential revenue stream that might be ahead for whatever it is that you offer. Lending, leasing, or renting, where the customer pays for the exclusive access to the product for a period of time. Things like office and production equipment might fall into that camp. Transportation equipment for your businesses to move product from point A to point B. Those could come into play if you have owned equipment or rent it or lease it. Licensing is another way that some companies generate a revenue, and that's for the use of something that you and your team, your business, has developed, intellectual property. Maybe it's software, Maybe you have a patent or a trademark or copyright materials. Maybe it's the brand that you have that's extended to another organization as part of the relationship that you have, and they pay a fee for the use of that. And presumably it then has some value. So those are all some things that could come into potential revenue streams. Now, to generate revenue, what do we have to do? And Sean, maybe I'll just ask you if you can watch for this. Maybe the people on the webinar right now could think about, in a word or two, what are some of the key activities that you do or have to do in order to generate a revenue? And Sean, again, if you want to just jump in, if there are some things that people have put into the chat there. And while
maybe one of those things could be contact, sales, purchase orders, awards.
The whole process of generating a lead, a prospect, a lead, making a sale.
Yeah. We got the comment here, invest in production facilities, so an investment, a product, a service, a facility.
So there may be some more that still come in, but key activities basically refer to the things that the business needs to do in order to provide the product or the service behind the company's value proposition. Now, on those key activities, and there's a little bit of activity on the screen, those key activities will require certain critical or key inputs. And that could be steps, it could be processes that are involved anywhere from the start to the finish of developing and delivering that product or service. So whether those activities, whether they're done internally with your own team members, or whether they're subcontracted out to a third party to deliver on your behalf, all of them would be seen as being necessary in order to generate that revenue stream that we just talked about. Now, here's something to think about, and I'm sure this has not escaped any of you folks that are out there. The whole concept of lean process thinking. And where is it that we can perhaps get greater efficiencies in what we're doing in that production process? So as you're experimenting, you may come across some things where you can remove some elements or streamline some elements that reduce the cost that's involved or accelerate the delivery of the product or service to your target audience. Anything else, Sean, that's popped up?
Yep, we got one popped up just now. Provide more education to employees and or customers.
And that will certainly help internally to get things done more accurately, perhaps more efficiently, finding better ways to do it. And also with the customers, helping them better understand the benefits that can be derived from the product or service that we make available. Yeah, that's great. So in order to do those activities, we may have all of the resources and tools that are necessary for us to do it on our own. However, in some instances, we may have to go outside of our own organization, certainly for resources, for inventories, for raw materials. It's not often that we're vertically integrated and have all of those connections that are necessary start to finish. So we do rely on suppliers. We rely on other parties to bring materials to us, to help in the transformation of those materials into finished products that then go to either customers at a wholesale level or perhaps out to the end user, as the case may be. So when we think about some of the key resources that are necessary, perhaps what we're dealing with is, or thinking about, it's things like people resources. Who are the people? What are the skill sets? What are the areas of expertise that we need people to have in order to do those activities? Financial resources. It takes money to make money, someone once said. And yeah, you can't, it's very rare that you can start on a total shoestring that has $0. You usually have to put some money into a process. And again, that's at the startup. But even for an expansion, it often takes significant resources, financial resources, to move a new product line into the market. Physical resources, that could be land, building, and equipment that's needed in order to transform that raw material into the products that we make, or intellectual resources, thinking through the research and the development that's maybe necessary to get your product line from where it is right now to where it needs to be for the next wave, the next generation of what's to come. So in this area here, one of the key things, coming back to the concept of lean process thinking, is how can we perhaps reduce waste, or maybe make changes to the materials that are used, find better materials, materials perhaps that are sourced that are less expensive than the ones we're using right now, keeping in mind our corporate responsibility in terms of ethical operations, fair trade, whatever it is that is guiding your organization. Those are important things to keep in mind, and even more important today with consumers and with customers than they were, say, a decade ago. So where can we make some improvements? Sean, did you have something?
Nope.
Okay, very good. So these key resources, in order to source them, we may need to go to key partners, develop some relationships that are going to be valuable to us in our go forward strategy. So key partners, they could offer greater efficiencies, improve our operations, and potentially reduce the risk that we as an organization, as a business, may be exposed to. In terms of the key partnerships, here's a couple of the things that I guess I have seen here in terms of partnerships. The typical one that we would see is the relationship between a customer, our customer, and us as a vendor, as a supplier. But if we think further up the supply chain, there's the relationship that we would have with our suppliers, our vendors that are providing us with these things. These could, in fact, morph over time, develop into long-term, valuable relationships that offer more than just a product or a service as a part of what we deliver to our customers. They could, in fact, develop into something like a strategic alliance. And that could even, going beyond suppliers, that could be, in fact, two competitors could possibly form a relationship that they find to be mutually beneficial. Now, that's a bit of a stretch, but it could occur in certain circumstances. And maybe that's better described by something like a joint venture, where two partners who are capable come together and to reduce the risk that any one of them would be exposed to, develop a strategic venture to go into a market that has a higher degree of risk than what any one of them would be comfortable taking on individually. Now, with all of that being said, and those last three components on how we're going to do the things that we do to develop the product or service and make it available, we really come down to taking a look at what costs, what investment would be required on our part in order to bring this into being. So one approach that would be applicable here would be to focus on the cost. What is the cost that's involved for us, and maybe do a cost plus type of approach. All of our input costs to deliver this are X number of dollars. We want to make a profit margin above that of a certain percentage, and that becomes the price. And if it meets with market approval, then we can enter into that. And if it's acceptable to the customer, if it's a competitive thing, if it's in keeping with what the market is offering, maybe we're good with that. Another approach, and this alludes to some of the things we talked about earlier today in terms of the relationship, if we're maybe looking at some sort of a value increase to our customer where we highly value the relationship, maybe what we're looking at is what are the things that we need to do to really win this customer over and have them as long-term satisfied customers. And keeping that in mind, we're more concerned on the value and the sense of appreciation hopefully, that our customers place in us as their supplier of choice. And so that's maybe another approach that we could take to delivering it. And so we're not necessarily looked at, how do we drive the cost down? It's are the costs of delivering at this level, at this higher level, is it something that the customer is willing to pay and appreciates? So a couple of things maybe to just focus on here as we talk about cost and wrap up this one section.
Quick question here was JVs or joint ventures are quite common in construction.
That's a comment, yes? Yeah, joint ventures.
I don't know what that was a reference for, but I think that was just talking about maybe other.
Yeah, I think that sounds like it's a supporting comment to the types of partnerships that we might want to establish. So yeah, joint ventures, it's nice to be able to share the risk with someone else. Share the risk, share the reward. Coming back to cost, fixed costs, these are things that do not change. So regardless of what volume of sales we may have with our product or service, our fixed costs are pretty much locked in. They're not going to change. So if you're doing some sort of a break-even analysis, and maybe you've got a department that would focus in on this and help you through that on behalf of the organization, fixed costs don't change. It would be things like your overhead costs, your facilities costs. That's not going to change whether you sell $1 of product or $1 million worth of a product. They're locked in. Variable costs, on the other hand, those could be the input costs for making the product or service, like raw materials, for example, components. As you buy them, or sorry, as you make more to satisfy your customers' requirements, there's greater demand for the product or service. Those variable costs will increase numerically as your revenue also increases from the sales you're making from delivering those to your customer. Two other concepts just to keep in mind here when it comes to cost is economies of scale, and that's basically where your cost per unit decreases as the volume of production increases. So you have a bigger operation, you're running at a higher level of capacity, a lot of your fixed costs have been locked in, and now you're still able to generate higher revenues by maximizing your capacity, and that allows you perhaps economies of scale. Economies of scope is another concept where perhaps the cost per unit decrease as greater investments are made by the business in things that support the core business. So that could be something like maybe an expansion of what the business is all about, taking on another division, or perhaps acquiring a competitor with some sort of a merger where they become a part of the supply. They were a part of your supply chain, and now they're embedded as a division of the larger organization. Again, keeping some of those profits in-house within the greater organization. So we're going to try to take some questions again. We're about 10 minutes to the top of the hour, or 8 minutes right now. So we're going to try to take questions that you may have. If you want to think about that and maybe pump those into Sean, he can compile those. But what I'd like to do is maybe very quickly take a look at 4 different phases of a business. And if you could maybe equate this in your own mind's eye to a physical relationship. We start as infants, little bundles of flesh that that can't support ourselves and are so dependent upon others. But over a lifetime, we grow, we develop, we mature, we learn, we become more capable of doing things. And at some point, after our working careers are traditionally over, we enter that golden age of retirement, and we enjoy the fruit of our labor, a lifetime of labor. If you think about that growth that an individual would experience, and maybe think about that over the life of your business, just to kind of come to this type of a picture. Here are a couple of things that an early stage organization, perhaps at startup and in the early going, would be thinking about. And just a couple of things that you'd maybe want to think about as you see these bullet points. These are things that are very important in the early stage in particular, as a business is getting itself established, getting its ducks in a row, is really thinking about what is it that the organization, the business wants to accomplish. How is it going to get those things done to satisfy the customers that it has in mind? Who is going to be involved? What systems need to be put in place to make sure that everything is done appropriately and efficiently? And what are the goals and objectives that we have for this business? What's the vision? What's the mission? Can we establish some goals and set timelines to those as to when we want to accomplish these different milestones along our trajectory into the future? Communication, again, is very important. The early stage organization needs to communicate internally, although it's often a small group, but they also need to keep lines of communication open with customers, with suppliers, with funding sources, with regulatory agencies that they're responsible to, and to make sure that everything is done appropriately.
Jim,
The
we
next
have a
page-
question. We have a question in here. Should this
Yep.
document be submitted to possible investors and lenders as an executive overview with a supporting detail behind?
You're referring to the business model canvas, and can it be used for that purpose? I think the short answer would likely be yes. I would just say, talk with whatever party you are working with there. What are their expectations? What is it that they'd like to see? I've often seen the canvas used and maybe a slide deck of maybe 10 slides to tell the story of what the opportunity that's being pursued and why it makes sense and why support would be reasonable. So I think the short answer is yes. To touch on this next phase a little bit further down the road, and maybe this is a few years into the life of a growing organization, just a couple of questions to go along with the supporting bullet points that you have here. Maybe it's time to take a look at what's working and what isn't working. Where could some improvements maybe be made? Are we achieving the results that we had set out to do? Have we hit those targets that were set? What new targets do we want to establish for the next period of time? Where do we need to focus? Where are the opportunities that are emerging as we look out ahead of us? What are some of the potential risks that appear to be materializing? Are we, or should we, be maybe thinking about, and this is maybe a leadership or an ownership question, the steps that would be necessary with respect to an exit strategy further down the road? And at this point, it's probably much further down the road. And whether it's the owners, whether it's the management team, or whether it's mid-managers that are responsible for different parts of the organization, there will be elements that every grouping within the organization needs to focus on as you look forward into the future. The third one, and I'll try to keep this fairly quick, an established business, it's comfortable, it's maybe maintaining, maybe it's even plateaued, but that's no place to sit and rest. Organizations need to look further down the road. If a business has plateaued, maybe it needs to be looking at where is an emerging opportunity that we can catch the wave and latch onto something that's going to take us to the next level. So where do we go from here? Are we keeping things running smoothly? Are we maximizing a return on investment for shareholders? We should, as an organization, be focused on planning for further down the road. And that leads us to the last little piece here, which is the transitioning phase. And I like the picture here. That's not me, by the way. That's not me and my good wife. But just to illustrate the point, the golden years, as they were called, this is where, again, in an organization, it's the passing of the baton from one generation perhaps to the next generation. I've seen that with family-owned businesses, and even with shareholder-owned businesses that have a board of directors. There is that transition. We all age as individuals. We move on to different aspects of our lives, and there is a transition that takes place in ownership and in management. So keep the momentum going, fine-tune the systems, make sure that you have the right people in the right places, doing the right things at the right time. That's pretty much what we wanted to share with you over the course of today. Sean, I'm going to ask you, did we have any questions that maybe came in from our audience today that you'd like to raise?
Yeah, we've got one here. How can one learn more on how to use or develop a canvas? Is there a
Mhm.
template available to download, or does one just create one themselves, or is it something you can help people with?
I think the answer is yes to all of those. I mean, even the slides that we have in this particular deck, if you've screen shared or captured perhaps the image, don't even worry about that. You can go online, do the search, business model canvas. You're going to find oodles of resources. Strategizer, one of the websites that was mentioned, they have all sorts of support tools and downloadables that will help you and your organization work through different things like this. I've gone to YouTube and I've looked at presenters that are sharing different perspectives on using the tool. The other piece that was mentioned there, yes, working with organizations, that's something I do on an ongoing basis, and using this tool is one of the regulars, one of the mainstays of what I do in a coaching and a mentoring capacity.
And then a comment was, that was absolutely good stuff. Thanks for sharing, Jim.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if that was my good friend James or not, but thank you one and all. I've enjoyed the opportunity to participate with you. And again, if you have opportunity to look at my website, there's more information on me. Those resources are available. I'm on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, as well as Twitter. Those platforms are all accessible off my website. And as mentioned, I'd be more than happy to talk with any of you further down the road as you're looking at this or other aspects, business model canvas or the more traditional business plan. Sean, thank you so much for this opportunity. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish each of you the best of success going forward. Back to you.
Another comment came in. Thanks for a very usable presentation. So positive feedback again, Jim. So appreciate Jim's time, all the organization of Robin and James behind the scenes on this, and also to the participants. So thanks for carving out some time in your day to join TIAC and Jim on this third installment of the webinar. Appreciate it.
All the
Everyone
best,
take care
everyone.
out there.
Thank you.